And it is recording, so.
I didn't even do anything.
Yep, don't say anything embarrassing.
All right, I guess I'll call it 7:30 and we have a quorum, so I can at least get what I'm supposed to say out of the way. All right, I'm gonna call the meeting of the ARPA Committee for Thursday, February 3rd, 2022 to order at 7:30. This is a virtual Zoom meeting which may be watched or may participate in the meeting remotely with the meeting link at http://southboroughtown.com remote meetings pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state emergency signed into law June 16, 2021. This meeting will be conducted by a remote participation. No in-person attendance members by the public will be permitted. All right. So we call to order and participants. Let me see who's over there on the attendees side. All right, we have Tony Schoner. Can you pull Tony over? He's in as an attendee instead of a panelist.
You want me to
Mimi
promote
Latrell as
panelists?
well. Yeah, they're in attendees. If you could promote Mimi and Tony to panelists, please. Yes. Hello, Mr. Schoner.
Good.
Mimi's coming in. All right, so now I'm just going to take a real quick roll call, so everybody knows who's here. Mr. Martell is here.
Present.
Mr. Palmer,
Here.
Mr. Schoner,
Here.
Ms. Rubenstein. You're on mute.
Here.
Ms. Hamilton
Here.
and Ms. Latrell.
Here.
All right, everyone's here. So if it's okay with you guys, I can't even believe I'm saying this. Can we hold where we have facilities and capital here tonight in the audience? I had requested from DPW and I never heard back from Ms. Galligan. So I'm assuming she's not coming. And I'm assuming that capital will cover most of what would be covered by Ms. Galligan anyway. Board of Health preferred to have a meeting of their committee before they spoke with us, which I understand. So we'll have them on a future one. So tonight will be just facilities. And Mr. Parent asked if he could go first so we can hit some things he need to take care of quickly. So if we could, we have the people online from facilities and capital. Would everybody okay if I move them first before the organization, the chart, or we can take a vote and discuss on who wants to be chair and vice chair and such. First, I'll leave it up to you guys, but I just know, they've been working all day and, if we could allow them to go first and then do it, if that's all right, if everybody else is okay with that for now.
I'm fine with
But
it.
if anybody wants to jump in and take over as chair right this second and then do that too, is fine with me.
Let's move on. Let's move on, John. Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to, I'm going to just move the agenda a little bit. We're going to have discussion presentations from chairs of department heads. So real quick, if Mr. Martell, if you could bring over John Parent from facilities, please.
Do you want him promoted to panelist?
Yeah, I think that's the only way that he can speak. I'm not.
There's an option to allow him to talk.
Either or, as long as.
I'm going to promote him because it's
I
safer.
think that makes sense. Mr. Parent, you're in. How are you?
Hi, everyone. How you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Basically, we got the request the other day for any ideas we feel that ARPA money may be appropriate for. on projects that we saw coming down the road. And the facilities department has identified two that I do feel that this money would be appropriate for. The first one being an addition on Quarterville Hall. For anyone who's been following this for the last couple of years, the senior center had requested an addition of space to help meet their needs for various classes and activities. They were running a little shy on space for at the current time. Needless to say, the town has been working on different examinations of possible avenues with buildings. But if this addition was to go forward at Cordova Hall, I do believe this would be an appropriate use of the ARPA money, being a one-time expenditure, and this is one-time funds. That kind of lines it in the sights of what we should be looking at doing with monies like this, and where it's already on a capital plan. I think that puts it in the comfort zone as well. I mean, when you do get money like this, it's nice if you can relieve some of the capital stress that would have been coming down the road. And so I feel this project would be a very good one for that. And another one, believe it or not, is ADA projects. I'm not sure how closely anyone's been following the ADA committee that was formed in town. Basically, they did a study about a year back that was very, very intense. It covered the town's buildings and fields and the school buildings. And they identified deficiencies. And the town will be working on correcting deficiencies. You may or may not be aware that the committee had put in a request for $50,000 worth of funds for this upcoming year to help start projects, but that start would be the key word there. And that would allow facilities the opportunity to work on smaller projects throughout buildings. But if you want to get into the heavy hitting stuff, something like ARPA would come in quite handy for the stuff that would have to be hired out. So those are the two items that basically I've identified that I feel, this would be an appropriate use for funds such as this.
Sorry, I'm muted. Mr. Palmer, I saw your hand go up first.
John, have we?
Hi, Joe.
How are you? Have we
How are
actually
you?
have we funded the expansion of doing the townhouse bathrooms? There we did one, right? But we still have the other to do.
The men's room has been funded for FY22. FY23, we have it in capital for this year's town meeting. It's something you could look at, but I would think the bigger project is probably better because I'm guessing they're probably not going to want to chop ARPA into little itty bitty pieces. So that's why I didn't recommend that when I looked at the capital plan, and this seemed to be a good one.
The two bathrooms, the two bathrooms, if we funded both of them, would come out to how much?
We have 40,000 for this year that's already approved, and we're going to go for 40 again next year.
Right. Okay.
If we're able to do it in-house like we plan, that I'm feeling that should still be enough.
Okay. Are there any other projects on there that are coming down the road that are going to be funded?
That are going to be funded for sure.
Well,
You never know year to year.
Yeah, I know. I'm there for you, but give me one you think is a pretty sure bang.
Honestly, I've never had a problem getting funding from the town because anyone who's worked with me, I'm straight laced. I don't ask for it unless you need it.
Yeah, that's why I'm
so I
asking.
can usually make a pretty good case for my projects.
Okay. All right.
Okay, Miss Hamilton.
Yep. So you mentioned the two projects, right? So there's the Quarterville Hall expansion and the ADA projects. Do you have any kind of rough budgetary estimates on those? Or are you thinking that's yeah?
Cornerville Hall, we had a working figure of 325. I am looking to get some updated figures currently. As everyone is aware, thanks to COVID, the markets are up, down, left, and right, and all over the place. In a normal great world, 325 probably will cover things fine for one.
325,000.
325,000, yeah.
Yep. Okay.
But needless to say, I'd like to get some updated figures just to make sure. And a little padding in there never hurts in a situation like this. Building materials, we've seen them go up 50%, 100%, come back down to normal, back up another 50%. So the next year could be a little turbulent still, or it could start to level out relatively quickly.
And then on the ADA compliance, you have 40,000 this year, and so the goal would be to pull forward some of the work that would be extended over time, and so presumably be looking for additional. Is that the thought?
Yeah, the ADA right now, it's 50,000 they're asking for FY23. So, outside of that, like I said, that's little projects we could do in-house with the current staff I have as filler work. That would be our goal. But when you get into bigger projects, like, you got to take a concrete ramp and adjust it and replace big handrails and bring in welding companies and such, those can add up a little bit quicker. So I would, in reality, probably $150,000, $200,000 wouldn't be a bad thing to ask for in this. I'm throwing it out there as basically, this is a possibility. And again, these are one-time projects for one-time funds. I try to stay clear of any kind of recurring expenses with one-time funds. It's bad politics.
Mr. Perrin, are these already on Capital's agenda? I mean, on their radar?
The addition of Quarterville Hall is. Capital already took up the 50,000 for the ADA. This would be above and beyond that. And you may be able to fund that 50 through ARPA. If you don't want to go above it, they could fund the 50 possibly this year to save putting it through general.
The $50,000 that you have in the budget this year, $45,000 that you have for ADA projects, what would you use that for? What would you do? I read the report. And
the goal is this year.
There's an awful lot.
Yeah, there truly is. The goal this year, we would probably attack a lot of the stuff that the public deals with generally more than in-house. You want to get that out of the way first. The stuff that the public can run into, issues with bathrooms, door levers, knobs, countertops, stuff like that, where basically the general public's going to run into it and use it. You want to get the stuff off the plate that the general public has to deal with first.
What about like the fields and things like that? Like I saw a lot of access to the fields was needed as well. So say, you're somebody that's handicapped and you're wheelchair bound and your kid's playing ball, or maybe your kid's in a wheelchair and they have low access on that. What's the rough cost to fix the fields? Has anybody looked at that yet? Do you know?
The fields would fall under recreation. I only handle the town building side.
Nope, I'll hit Jason up with that next. I'm sure Capital's already talked about that one as well. So,
but definitely a good idea too. Again, that's something that really should be addressed. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand up, Mr. Palmer. I apologize for speaking before you.
Yeah, no. One reason why I brought up other projects, John, was because the senior center expansion is right now hanging on what the schools are going to do next. Exactly. So that one for us is sort of up in the air, which is why I asked for other sort of like flashbangs that are already there, even if they're small, because that one we may have to hold off on for a while until that decision's made. Not that I think there's widespread support for it. No argument against that. But if we're going to move them, then we wouldn't invest that money there. So, moving forward, if we had a couple other things on the board, that would help the committee later on down the line. That's all I was intending with that.
Fair enough. Yep.
So if there's something else that you want to throw on the fire, feel free to do so.
Currently right now, these are the two that I really identified out of my capital, because I've really tried to trim down the capital for the next few years.
Okay.
And there's a project or two down the road, but I also have an ability to get some grants down the road for that if we did them now, we'd lose out on that grant money. So okay. I know you have plenty of people that would love to get their hands on this that would help the capital in the long run.
All right, I fully understand. Something to address something that you were talking about, John, with the fields and other things. A lot of the things dealing with some of the ADA compliance are like doing sidewalks around the town. It's cheaper to do sidewalks when you're redoing a road than just doing the sidewalk itself. And with some of the field issues and some of the stuff in the ADA, some of them will be easier to address moving forward when we do larger projects, and then we can address sort of the whole thing at once, as opposed to trying to do a piecemeal project to address one issue without addressing other issues that are also along with it. So when we're doing ADA compliance, I have no problem, funding some of that, which is why we voted on capital to approve the 50,000. We just need to be a little careful on choosing individual projects that may be part of a larger scheme when we're funding.
Could not agree more.
Projects. So it's not that
absolutely.
I'm not speaking against doing more ADA or other types of projects, just that they need to be taken. I would say that we need to appreciate them in context with the department that's going to handle them and understand that may be part of a bigger project.
Yep, fully concur with you. Absolutely. Economies of scale too.
Oh, that was all. Thanks.
Does any other committee member have any more questions for Mr. Parent? All right. Well, John, thank you so much for coming. I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
everyone.
Thanks,
I
John.
you know what?
Have a great
While you're
night.
here, if you putting off the senior center because you may be moving them, when will you know when does anybody think that's going to shake out?
That's really more in the ballpark of whether the school committee decides and gets they're applying to the MSBA right now. They were one of the last finalists for funding. I don't think they're going to get it this time around, so they're going to have to redo it. But the school committee subcommittee is already looking at the cost of building one without MSBA funding. That doesn't mean that they're going to do that. It just means that they're also exploring multiple avenues for that. Because if they decide to build a new Neary, then they would probably be able to move all of Woodward into Finn and to Neary, and then that would free up Woodward, which would then be free to become a town campus and incorporate senior center, lots of town departments, building, which is in the bottom of that senior center building, as well as one or two other offices. So they'd be able to realign the town. So it's part of the space needs study was incorporated into figuring that out. So that'd be sort of a bite for this committee that we probably don't want to worry about just yet. I'm just saying that that's one particular project that we'll have to look into much more closely and maybe wait another month or two to see how things are going to shake on some other trees.
Now, could you earmark money for that project and park it until we know? Is that one of those type of deal things? Because we have till 2026 to use this. And if all of a sudden it fails through because the town decides they don't want to spend the money to build a new school, and I'm just throwing this out there, or Woodward, is that something that would need to do? And where would the funding come then? Is this something that could be earmarked for then?
If you're asking me,
Under the rules, I'm just curious.
If you're asking me, I would say, given what we've been told, I would say, sure, we can do that. The thing though is if and likely it would be used like that. I mean, there are a lot of dominoes in that to fall on some of these things. I would merely say that then it would be to the select board to reassign that money. So, do we want to leave them without a recommendation, but leave that on the board? Maybe. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, you've another question, I guess. I see a hand up in the audience, but I'm gonna take public comment after everything from the committee real quick, if that's okay, and after Mr. Malinowski speaks, just like we were in a regular meeting. So I saw your hand up, and I will ask for a public comment shortly, I promise. So I'm sorry about that. I just want to start that out there real quick. So anybody else have any questions or comments for Mr. Parent? All right, seeing none. Ms. LaChaw, I got a question for you. Just a policy question. Where should I allow, is this where I should, just in case the public's question is to Mr. Parent, should I let them ask the question now for public comment or wait till the end of the meeting for public comment? Just a procedure question. If anybody else can help me with that one too.
You can do whatever you want. You don't have to take public comment at all because it's not a hearing, but you can do whatever you want.
Oh, always have public comment. I'm trying to see. The person that had, I apologize. I don't know whose hand was up earlier in the audience. Is that
It's in the
something that can
chat,
wait, or is
John.
it? What's that?
It's in the chat. It was just a comment about the need being now and the Woodward project being more of a mid to long term. That's all. That's what it was.
Oh, okay.
So it was a statement of urgency from the public.
No, it
There's
was.
a separate hand
There was
up.
another hand. It's Mary Ann has her hand up. So I'm going to allow her to ask a question. Mary Ann, what was your question? You're allowed to speak now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay. This is actually a comment to Joe's comment about the senior center. And the other night when we were at the advisory board, I think Kathy Cook, who sits on that school building committee, mentioned how long it will take to actually build that school. And she mentioned 8 to 10 years out. And I think what people need to understand is that the senior center has been waiting very patiently to get this addition done. And if you're looking at 8 to 10 years, it's an immediate need at this point. We've been, this has been going on for about 4 or 5 years. We could have had this done, 2 or 3 years ago because of the need. And so, when you say that, Woodward may happen and this and that, that's going to be 8 to 10 years away. And, if you look at the amount of the money and you say 8 to 10 years, you're talking about $32,000 a year for 10 years. That's not a lot of money to spend on a senior center who has been waiting for a long time. So I just want you to take into consideration that it's not necessarily you're putting money into a building that you're going to maybe not use after 10 years, but the fact that that at this point, the senior center needs something immediately. So that's all I wanted to say for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mary Ann. Appreciate it.
I can give a little bit of background on that. I was on advisory when they first came to us, and it has been a while. But I think a lot of the delays were a function of getting the time from Assabet, from the students who were going to perform the labor. So that really is why it was delayed. And then COVID happened. So there were reasons why this hasn't moved forward. It's always had advisory support historically. Where we are now is an unfortunate consequence of those two things, right? So it's not that we've been kicking this down the road. There is a need and it's understood.
Okay. All right. So any other questions for Mr. Parents? Like I know you've already run over what you thought. Oh, Mr. Chell. I love these little hand things up. This makes it so easy. Mr. Chell.
Just quickly, so will the renovation on Quarterville Hall address the accessibility to the second floor?
No.
Okay.
The second floor currently is occupied by facilities in-house. The renovation of the first floor basically handles everything downstairs. And of course, if we're doing that addition, we would want to tweak the stuff for the ADA. Believe it or not, Quarterville Hall didn't have that much on the ADA list. It wasn't one of the worst buildings. So a lot of it we're hoping we can take care of in-house. There will be some farming out of some stuff, but the goal, of course, with the senior center always as compliant as you can make it. That's definitely one of those buildings that you got to focus on and say, you got to take care of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Mr. Parent, then I'll say thank you again.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Have a great night. And Mr. Malinowski is in the audience. Can you bring him over? And I'm going to, there we go.
I tried. You try again. There we go.
Thank you. Jason, thank you for your patience. And I know that probably what you're going to say would have set the table nicely, and I apologize and answered a lot of questions, but I had promised.
No problem. So I will note that capital planning did post a meeting, given that 2 of your members are members of capital planning. I make a 3rd. I don't see a 4th in the audience, so we do not have a quorum. So just wanted to note that procedurally. I had a few things prepared to say, John, but with the will of the committee, I just wanted to kind of maybe react and clarify some factual items from the discussion that you just had with Mr. Parent, and it may lead into some of my comments that I was thinking about, as we move forward here. Does that work for everyone?
That's fine for me.
So just to clarify, for the 2022 annual town meeting in a couple of months, we are carrying $50,000 that has been fully supported by capital. Advisory and the select board have not taken positions on any of our positions yet. But that is solely from an ADA perspective related to building. It has nothing to do with recreation. Mr. Schoner actually is going to be our representative to work on a more comprehensive plan related to the recreation ADA recommendations. And I think that's going to come part and parcel with some of the discussions you all have been already having here right now about the future of certain facilities in town. And I think there's a general sense that you would initiate capital related to those facilities, either when they're being upgraded or if you know they're going to be a long-term asset to the community, i.e. you wouldn't go around every playground, you would pick a playground to focus on sort of thing. So we are looking at programming around that. The big thing with ADA though to remember is there are grants out there every year. And while we fully support what has been appropriated this year, the main reason it was brought forward by the town administrator who sits on the accessibility committee was because we were unsuccessful with this year's grant due to the competitive nature. So I think the opportunity for this current year is really to offset the general fund for an article that is being brought forward to town meeting. The other thing I will briefly mention, the data that was presented at advisory was not entirely accurate related to timing, related to the broader plan that has been discussed pretty publicly now between the school research subcommittee, the capital planning committee, the school committee, et cetera. Big picture though, when you consider Quarterville Hall, there's no way anything will be actionable in the next 5 years. So I think what, the decision you're gonna look at, and I'll get into it with some of my, I'll call it prepared remarks, is the decision you're gonna be looking at there is it worth the 325 that John quoted for the at least 5 years, likely longer, but it's probably closer to 5 than 10, to add what I would call our most deferred capital item in our capital plan. As everyone knows, items in capital get deferred from year to year due to the circumstances that Tim mentioned in terms of just ASBIT not being available to do it, or just we run out of funding as a town and can only tolerate so much of a tax rate increase. So I would just say that that's going to really be your action. I'll come back to that a little bit, but I just wanted to clarify the timeline because it doesn't necessarily jive with some of the things we're discussing. So the one thing I thought I would start out with from a capital planning perspective is there is a capital policy in town. To have an item on the capital plan, you must go through a process with capital planning. I know, John, I shared the capital policy with you. It's also on the town website.
I had them send it to all the members as well.
Okay. So I think that, I'm not going to read it to you, summarize it to you in any way, shape, or form, but I would ask of anyone that comes before you, if there's an item that's before you and it's not on the capital plan, why it's not there. Because I think, John Parent did a nice job of articulating at least my own personal view that, this one-time funding should not be for things that, are not sustainable going forward, but is, a unique opportunity, obviously, to deal with things we know we're going to have to deal with anyways as a community, and hopefully, obviously, provide, some sort of tax relief instead of burdening the taxpayers with 100% of some of these projects. So the key requirement in the capital plan, though, just so you're all aware, is if you choose to advance a project to the select board and it's greater than $10,000 and it fits some of the criteria in the capital plan, it's actually gonna have to come back to capital for review before the select board can even consider it, if they follow their own policy. Because the policy is indifferent to the funding source. Doesn't matter whether it's gonna be funded through a town meeting article, doesn't matter whether it's gonna be funded through a revolving article. And we've even gotten boards and committees, and I'll use the school committee as the best example, to actually comply with the policy, even though they didn't have to, because they're not obviously appointed, they're elected, because it's just good transparency to the taxpayers that there was a vetting process, that this actually is a need of the town versus a want. So I think that's just an important backdrop that we would ask you to consider with whatever comes after us, moving forward. If you do think it hits the threshold, we obviously you have two members of capital planning sitting here on a regular basis. We would be willing to entertain a review of those in real time to the extent needed to, not get in the way of any of your work. But I do think it would be prudent for us to stay connected on that, because we don't want, something to be recommended, have the support, but then not comply with a policy that, at least in my own personal view, has been well received, to create kind of some boundaries around how we act as a town related to large purchases of tangible items. So I guess I'll stop there and see if there's any questions, John, from your committee before I kind of summarize.
I have a quick question. Now, your role too, as capital to the Board of Selectmen, just for the people in the audience and that may not know, it's advisory only, correct? Or is it, that's it? So
Right.
the Board of Selectmen could still choose to do it, but more than likely they'd go by, I'm assuming that they'd go by the recommendation of the capital committee. Historically, I'm sure they have that too, but it's not, I guess, how am I trying to say it?
No, I understand. You're spot on, John, right? We're an ad hoc committee as currently construed. We've been around for 2 years, and they haven't deviated from any of our recommendations yet, but they have every right to, as does town meeting. So I think that's just the reality of what we deal with. Now, there is a bylaw proposed on the warrant for this year to make the committee permanent, which would mean, I believe, and I could stand corrected, that capital planning will be the one sponsoring articles moving forward related to capital, unless it's being brought forward by another board of committee, or it'd be a joint recommendation moving forward. But at the very least, there would be a recommendation from capital planning, and the warrant related to capital items moving forward is the intent of that bylaw, because it would be a
Makes
standing
sense.
committee.
Okay,
Any other questions on the policy?
I don't have any. Anybody
Okay.
else?
So since we got the request, capital planning has not met. So what I thought I would do is summarize what we know about and what we've talked about extensively in public meetings and have voted to put into the capital plan. Much of what I tell you coming up has not been necessarily prioritized, and I would appreciate feedback on whether you would like us to prioritize, because the list of items that I'm going to give you will more than exhaust any amount of money that you are dealing with recommending by a long shot. And I think that's the clarity I would like to take back to my committee of what we can do to help you. But also, we don't want to get in the way of kind of the independent review that you're doing, but realize that every department head that follows us is likely going to have something that I'm already going to talk about tonight. So, thinking about your process moving forward, I know Ms. Galligan, for example, actually reached out to me late this afternoon to set up time to talk about her capital plan and what she's planning to present forward and make sure that it aligns with what capital has always seen as a priority. So I'd say the benefit, obviously you have two members sitting here right now that will be with you throughout the process, is we've tried to look across the board, right? We don't sit on any of these other committees or don't have relationships with any of these other departments. We try to act as like an independent body to bring forward a well-rounded capital plan based on a variety of factors that are outlined in the capital policy. Obviously, if something is unsafe, that's usually a very high priority, as opposed to something that is a new service that usually gets a little more skepticism, review, etc. So just I'll lay that foundation. I am not planning to walk through everything that's in the capital plan over the next 5 years, but I focus on the next 5 years because of your duration that you have to spend the money. We have a capital plan as a town that goes out 10 years, but I figured I'd highlight a few things. Again, it may become repetitive. I will start with facilities, given you just heard from John. What John outlined are the two material items that we have focused on for some time as part of capital. We took a vote that was unanimous last year related to specifically the senior center, that it was our top priority. And when Assabet, who was the preferred vendor at the time, because of the need to manage the cost, and there was significant labor savings, plus it's a great educational opportunity for the students, that was really one of our top priorities. And it just has been deferred, not due to funding reasons, but due to what Tim already mentioned in terms of timing of asset availability. As John mentioned, and I just want to make sure everyone focused on this, we're going to explore two paths. We're going to continue to explore the asset path and realize that that schedule continues to be a moving target, but we're also looking at third-party labor just to see, because we do realize we're working on borrowed time at this point to be able to meet the needs that were discussed earlier. And I'm sure the Council on Aging will certainly submit their own recommendations, letters, et cetera, related to this. I would say based on everything I know, and I also sit as the chair of the school research subcommittee that's making the recommendation to the school committee next week related to the grander plan. If you're going to do something with Quarterville Hall, now is the time. Punting this 2, 3, 4 years down the road not only doesn't suit their needs, but it also diminishes the return of any investment we make, whether it be with true general fund money, which is obviously outside of your purview, or ARPA. So I think the not to put any pressure on you, I think that this is the moment to either decide whether we should or should not act related to this particular item, because we're looking at a 5 to 7 year timeline.
I understand the timeline, but I think what's difficult, and tell me if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong. It's very likely that whatever money we put into this right now, and if we sell this building off, it could be raised, we could lose it all.
That's completely accurate, Tim. That's what I'm saying. This is a 5 to 10 year investment. It's not a 30-year investment that you'd be.
Thank you, Jason. I get what you're saying now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Hamilton, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, as someone a little bit newer to all this, can you just give like the 30-second overview of what the Quarterville Hall project is, what it's for, who it serves, like the history of it?
Primarily the seniors. It would be an addition that would come out the front of the building towards Quarterville Road. And it would basically give them additional space to mainly gathering space, activity space, and educational space to perform all of the functions that they do on a day-to-day basis. Obviously, they've been incredibly hampered by the pandemic, but this has been on the capital plan since before we actually were formed as a committee, just so everyone's aware. That's going to be one of the only things that was there and is still there that we haven't been able to action in some way, shape, or form.
And then presumably it's to meet growing need of the senior center. It's that the senior center has never quite met what it needs to do.
Yeah, I mean, I would defer that question to the Council on Aging when they come before you. But they are incredibly passionate about this, and I would not do it justice. My job here is to inform you that Capital has vetted this very strongly over time and educate you on really what the decision is, which goes to Tim's question. It's a short-term investment in what's the return on that investment. Obviously, you're going to probably have some differing views on that.
Jason, what's the municipal square foot cost for new construction now? Roughly. I'm assuming you.
Yep, $600. Using a bid from about a month ago, $600 per square foot. That's just construction. That's
not
materials
material
and labor. Soft cost, like which would be your designers, your OPMs, et cetera. That's another 25%. So it ends up being about $750 per square foot.
Okay, so we're putting off. So that would be I'm assuming that would be roughly third-party costs for the senior center if it wound up going that route, correct? Maybe less, because I'm sure you can get Aspet, Keep Tech, one of the other. I don't think you're going to have to go as high as that. But we're hinging this on whether we are going to, whether the town is going to approve building a school at $600 a square foot and rehabbing Woodward at $600 a square foot.
Woodward would be a
that's a
different
question.
Woodward would be a different number because it would be renovation.
That's all not new. So let's say that's $200 a square foot to renovate, correct? Because when we did,
I'm not willing to commit to a number yet because it hasn't been.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just with public safety when we were looking at the fire station to redo that. it wound up being roughly the same to convert, but obviously Woodward's a much newer building, and it's all just, I'm assuming inside is those metal studs that you can just unscrew and move around almost like an office building. So it'd be a lot easier and cheaper.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Palmer, I see you have your hand up. I apologize.
Yeah, I was just gonna add, we can't really determine rehab costs until they actually come up with an interior plan for all the departments. It's not fair for us to really worry about that at the moment. That's somewhere far in the future.
I just wanted to put it in context in my own head that, like Jason said, if we're going to do anything with the senior center, we need, or Quarterville Hall, whatever you want to call it, we need to do it soon.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, okay, so, we're hinging on it, that everything else passes, that they're going to be moved to across the street if everything goes through. So I'm thinking when Mr. Martell was saying, is it worth the investment of $400,000 if it's going to be changing 5 years? I'm thinking it's going to be closer to 8 years myself, and that's what, $50,000 a year. So and yeah, to me it sounds like it may be, but we'll hash that out more in the future, I'm sure.
Yeah,
So,
no, I think Jason framed it perfectly. If you're willing to make the investment now because you think the changes won't come for a certain amount of time, I mean, that was a very fair assessment of the situation the way it is.
and the cost will just go up exponentially 5 or 8 years from now if we wind up doing it then. Is that what you're trying to say too, Jason?
No. I'm agreeing with Jason. If the committee deems it that they want to do the senior center, it should be right now, not a year from now, not 2 years from now, because if they're going to change and build a school and do those changes later, that and that's what I wasn't framing it as well as Jason is framing it right now. If you're going to make, and the school committee is going to make a change, then right now, maybe the time frame that you want to work on and is not to pay for that senior center. But if you think it's going to be 6, 7, 8 years, or in the process of putting that new school in is going to be that far out, well, then I think he's right that you would say, look, if you're going to prioritize the seniors and make an addition on that building, then make the decision right now and just do it, because you're going to get X number of years out of that investment, which might make it worth it to the seniors and to the community. But if they're not going to build the school, certainly it's worth it. Absolutely worth it. 100% worth it. That's more where I was going. I don't know when that decision is going to be made, and I don't know the timeline of building the school. So the way Jason framed the argument is, look, if you're looking at the school 7, 8 years out, I would say, for the seniors' benefit for 7, 8 years, it's probably well worth it. The age of a senior is, and the lifespan of a senior is that, you want to get this done now if you're going to get it done now.
How quickly can it get done? I mean, if we made a decision tomorrow to use this money for that, when would you have this up and running?
It depends on which path you take. You could, if they do the ASAVIT route, it's going to be subject to ASAVIT schedule, which John Parent checks in regularly with the ASAVIT vocational school to check on the availability. The last we heard was a year from now, but their timeline continues to shift, and it could be more favorable. Like, I don't want to say it's only going to be worse. It could be favorable. So I don't want to leave anyone with the impression, but I think that's why it's important to also say we could go, if we knew we had a certain amount of funding and this was a priority that you recommend and the select board ratify, you could go out and do a public bid process that takes a month, and usually the contractor mobilizes. It's not outside of the realm of possibility, and I do see that there's some of the seniors here. You could have this done in calendar year 2022 if you go outside of ASAVIT.
Okay, so
How much that's going to cost is subject to what John is trying to track down, because I think that's going to probably help inform all of your decisions.
So ASABET is start time in a year is what we know now, but it's moving outside bid, potentially something that could be done this year.
Correct. And ASABIT will naturally take longer because there's
Yep.
only so many hours in a school day, and they have other things that they do. Obviously, the school versus a third party laborer is going to want to be in and out to get their fixed fee and move along.
Yep. Okay.
Mr. Palmer, I see your hands up.
Yeah, in terms of this project, I'd also like to point out that it was used as a voting venue. in the last, I remember going over there and voting recently. So this is another, if we're looking at this seriously, we should look at this in I would say multiple dimensions and say we're doing it for the seniors, but this could also help in terms of the way that the building is used in the future, at least in the short term. Thanks.
So that's what I had to cover on town facilities in the next 5 years. Longer term, we are certainly focused on discussions with the library, but we do not believe the state library grant cycle will open and need funding from the town in the next 5 years. And the library board concurs with that based on their due diligence. However, they are part of the broader space needs study that's been mentioned multiple times here tonight of how do we capture them potentially within existing infrastructure and accommodate their long-term plan. So I would be remiss not to at least mention that. I'm not covering, again, every nuanced item. I'm covering themes. And if you want me to drill deeper at a future time, you let us know. But again, like I said, I could make your job really easy or really difficult based on the numbers we're dealing with. When we look at public safety, both police and fire, as many of you know, the fire department has a ambulance fund. So if you get transported via ambulance, there is a billing to your insurance provider. That does help to sustain most of their capital assets, doesn't sustain all of them. But when we look forward over the next 5 years, the main thing that stands out on the fire department side is their self-contained breathing apparatus, which will come due here in the next 2 to 3 years based on where we have it scheduled out with Chief Achilles. That's approximately a $300,000 item 2 years out. All fire items usually are also have the ability to get federal grant funding through the Assistance to Firefighters program. It's run by FEMA. It's an annual cycle. It is incredibly competitive though. So just because there are grants out there doesn't mean we get one every year. The chief has been very active in applying, has been unsuccessful to date, but we'll see where that goes. On the police side, they obviously have annual cruisers, which I would call recurring items. So I'm not here to discuss that, but I did want to make you aware that anyone obviously that follows the news is aware of the legislation in Massachusetts related to body cameras. The town of Southborough currently does not use body cameras for our police officers. However, they do carry tasers and have carried tasers in their budget for some time. The important thing to note with this program is the chief is looking at a 10-year program for these assets. Again, it's a large number. It's about $600,000 over the 10 years to integrate all of those devices together. We actually just deferred it from this consideration this year into a future period, mainly because it requires collective bargaining, which is currently underway. And it also is the subject of a potential grant from the state level. So the state already does have some grants out there specific to body cameras. They're not as great as what may be coming. And there may be some mandatory requirements coming from the state, which would hopefully come along with funding. So the chief is monitoring that very closely from a legislative perspective, but that is a big item that the town will have to tackle if we don't come across additional items here over the next couple of years. Other sources, that is.
This is to purchase body cameras?
Purchase,
That's the whole
service
600?
them, maintain
Okay.
them,
Okay.
store the video, the whole package that's integrated that Chief Paulus, I'm sure, can give. He gave us a pretty detailed insight into it, and the committee was very supportive of putting on the capital plan, but also cautioned against integrating something that may be funded from other sources.
How does that relate to the taser piece? Is that
They're tied together. So basically, if an officer pulls the taser, it naturally will activate their body camera under
Got
this
it.
new
Okay.
system.
okay?
Versus it doesn't require like someone to manually turn it on, is what was presented to us.
Okay, and so that's that fully integrated system with it. Got it. Okay.
Yep.
Mr. Palmer, see your hands up.
Yeah, Jason, I know you mentioned the cruisers were doing what, about 110 or 120,000 a year?
Depends on the year, Joe. This year, for example, is only one cruiser. It's approximately 60,000 per cruiser. The chief is committed to going all hybrid on his cruisers. So last year was his first year doing that. We actually then John Parent, who is the facilitator of the Green Communities program for the town, gets a $5,000 rebate on each of those. And under last year's gas prices, not this year's, saved over $3,000 in fuel. So I think you all can do some math of what that would be this year, a lot more. So it's a regular item though, Joe. It's one cruiser 1 year, two the next year, one, and the chief maintains a pretty detailed mileage listing and typically likes to retire them at about 100,000 miles, given that those are hard 100,000 miles. That's not just sitting on a highway, cruising at 65.
So we're likely to do 2 cruisers next year.
That's correct.
Okay.
And that's what's in the capital plan.
Yep.
Jason, you actually got to consider idle time on those cars as well. So 100,000 miles with idle time of as much as they get, it's even more.
Agreed.
Jason, what are some other vehicles that are going to be on the capital plan in the next 2 or 3 years that would normally be financed, but we could pay it out of a general fund instead?
So by finance, you mean bonded, Joe?
Yeah, normally we would bond them, but instead of bonding them, we could pay for them outright.
So there's nothing this year. Everything is an appropriation. It's a cruiser and a pickup truck for the fire department. I'd also be remiss to say that these items tend to sometimes also attract the attention of the nonprofits in town for gifts, pilot payments, donations as well. They tend to gear some of that towards public safety. So that has been put on the select board's radar as well. Again, finding all funding sources. Next year, the fire chief continues to carry a all-terrain vehicle that has been put off many times, and we're working with Trails to potentially grant fund that. And the police chief has 2 cruisers. 2024, I'm using town meeting dates, not fiscal year dates. The fire department has nothing. Police department has cruisers. And in 2025, we have an ambulance and cruisers. Ambulances are almost always paid from the ambulance fund. Doesn't typically hit the tax rate per se. It's all taxpayer funding, because if you didn't have the ambulance fund, you would transfer that to the general fund. I don't want to lose anyone with kind of some of the lingo, but it really doesn't hit your tax rate per se when you purchase an ambulance, because it's funded by proceeds that are already sitting there. So really nothing, Joe, because we just did all the fire trucks.
And can you tell the committee what we have planned for a road budget moving forward and what we funded and what we've pushed?
I'll get to DPW because I'm just on public safety.
Okay.
But that's going to be, I'm saving the best for last, DPW and schools.
Thanks.
Jason, would it be prudent for us to ask you to, do you have, I asked every other board and committee to have their top 4. Could we ask the capital committee what your top 4 was, or if we decided to give you 25% of the funding, 50% of the funding, 75% of the funding, what would you use for that capital money for and prioritize? Is that something?
Why don't you wait until I get through the next 2 items?
No, I just mean in general. I don't mean, I mean,
John, I don't think that's fair to Jason necessarily, because capital doesn't necessarily prioritize within they prioritize in silos, not necessarily across silos. So what's important in public safety is not necessarily more important necessarily than something urgent in recreation, but usually it does. It's
yes, it is.
I would say I
defer things, so that way if I know what would be deferred and what wouldn't, so it's a double-edged sword.
I appreciate that. Just being in capital, I think the way that the question is phrased isn't necessarily the way that we operate all the time.
I'm probably phrasing it incorrectly, but it would be helpful to know what capital items, if it has to be spent before 2026, what would it go to?
Let me get through schools and then we can discuss that. It's a fair question. I get why you're asking it. I think it's going to come down to what percentage allocation you want to put towards capital items, because I don't know what you're going to hear next. And I don't know, I want to be cognizant of what you're going to hear from the community unrelated to capital, right? In how you all decide to prioritize that. I would say, come back to me on the back end after hearing from those folks, and capital will be ready to react to that question. But everyone good on public safety. I'm going to quickly hit recreation. They have a very comprehensive capital plan. It's light years different than what we saw when we started as a capital committee. The rec commission and Tim Davis have taken a lot of time to take a step back and look forward. The thing with recreation in general is they do have a lot of fields coming up in the next couple of years. A lot of that's going to be highly dependent upon the overall plan that we decide to take with our schools and with the Woodward facility, because some were tied and interlinked together. The other thing is those are possible projects for CPA funding, which is, again, it's certainly taxpayer funds, and it's certainly subject to allocation each year at town meeting, but it is an eligible category that not all of these projects fit under. So, I don't know how you view all that. I'm sure you have some individual views, but there is basically a recreation field every year for the next 5 years if that was a priority you wanted to focus on. Related to DPW, they have a vehicle every year, whether it be a large loader or pickup trucks, et cetera. Think about all the heavy machinery you've all seen each year. Some are paid out of general fund, some are split with the water fund. Unless anyone wants me to go through all the details, I think the awareness there should be, there's a vehicle that's usually 6 figures, like 100,000-ish to 150,000 each year that we could certainly outline for you. But the big item is roads and sidewalks. I know it's a very hot topic in this town right now. Leaving any of that off to the side and what's already been put out to bid and projects that are already out there, what we are proposing as capital for this year, and we've spent some time trying to rejigger the process, so to say, is we do think that if town meeting funds $400,000 this year through the general fund for roads, that the DPW superintendent will actually be able to go out and do a second road contract this year to fix a lot. There's a series of side roads. So it wouldn't be any one road in particular. It would be pick your favorite road with potholes, et cetera. That's probably pretty high on Karen's list. So it wouldn't be a large project like you're seeing with the downtown Newton Street type area. But there is, if we fund that at town meeting, that will certainly put another dent into what I'll call deferred road maintenance that's out there, coupled with funding that comes from the state to match some of that, which you commonly hear referred to as Chapter 90. That's not what I'm really here to talk about, though. I think there's just 2 things you should be aware of with roads. We could certainly increase what we allocate each year if we have this ARPA funding source to put a bigger dent in some deferred maintenance. And Karen, at least for the first time I've seen, has a list of what roads she has prioritized. That road list is approximately $5 million as of our last capital meeting. A good chunk of that, about 60%, is Quarterville Road. And that's the stretch from the DPW facility down to the MBTA. She is proposing, and has been on the capital plan for many years now, a one-time project to really put sidewalks, like true sidewalks along that stretch, as well as, basically what we call a complete street, the entire way, the appropriate width, bike lanes, everything that is now kind of required in that sense. It, to our understanding, does not require easements during that stretch, which I think is a hot topic in this town based on what happened on Main Street. And that is something that's just looming out there. It was supposed to be this year. She punted it to next year, not because we're not ready. We're actually shovel ready, which I think is really important. But she hasn't done the public forums yet that she thinks are important to gather feedback from the public, mainly because of COVID. We've encouraged her to try to start doing those via Zoom so that if federal funding or state funding related to roads come out, this would be a golden opportunity for that. We're also trying desperately to partner with EDC related to the One Stop, and obviously it really falls to the select board. But the One Stop grant process, which I think covers at least 10 grant programs in the state, has a MassWorks program, which is infrastructure. It's an infrastructure grant program, but you need to tie it to private development. But with everything that's going on in related to the MBTA communities, and I'm sure Ms. Luttrell can probably speak to that well better than I could, we're trying to tie it to that, as well as some of the development that's actually happened in the neighboring communities. So again, some of the stuff could be subject to additional funding from a road perspective, but it's crystal ball type approach. So I think, anything you allocate towards these things, if you should have a backup list, because I think the general message that I would encourage you at least deliver is you should continue to look for other sources, given how broad your perspective could be and how to allocate the funding. But we're not aware of any sidewalk programs. And every survey that I've ever seen in this town, no matter how well done it is not only do we have not great sidewalks right now, i.e. some need to be ripped up and started all over, there's a lot of places that could benefit from new sidewalks. So one of the things you could consider is there a one-time opportunity, and we've discussed this at Capitol, to put together, and you usually need about $1 million or more, just to have a what I call a biddable project, to go out and put a huge dent in either deferred maintenance or new infrastructure. And you could choose what your priority is, but the reason that 1 million is important is you get no economies of scale in going out and getting, the sidewalk on John Street, repaired. That's not worth it. You're paying a premium, because if you're the contractor, you don't want that project. You want the larger project. So it's just something that we continue to hear. We've had some discussions with the town administration, particularly Mark and Brian, about even floating a bond for something like that to spread it out over many years, but really get caught up. And I think, ARPA could certainly be a potential offset to some of that. So I'm going to pause because I see 2 hands. John, you look like you're on mute.
So, first off, the first one you talked about, the stretch for Quarterville Road, the complete street, right? So it's a street, bike lane, sidewalk. Did you say that was 500,000 or 5 million?
There's 5 million overall
Okay.
of identifiable projects that have no funding right now.
Holistic within.
Holistic within the town of Southborough.
Okay. For
That's
DPW.
per the DPW director.
Okay. Okay.
Based on current conditions of each of those roads.
Got it. So holistically, their full plan for the town is 5 million. Specifically, we've identified that stretch on Cornerville for this sort of quote unquote holistic street.
That's about half of it, 2.5 million.
Okay, and that's about 2.5 million. Do we have? Because I mean, I'll say I've been going through old surveys this last week, and I will second what you said. Like there is the only through line you get, and it doesn't matter if you're doing it from economic development, doesn't matter, like anywhere you look, someone's asked, it's sidewalks. Do we have, I mean, I know we have sidewalk committees, right? So like, how ready to go are we potentially on sidewalk projects? Or are we really starting from, planning level? I guess I was doing some like Googling online, and it looks like it's something like $200,000 to $500,000 per mile of sidewalks to install. So like we have somewhere like 5 to 15 miles of sidewalks in our budget, but I have no idea if we have any more data other than people like sidewalks.
Yeah, that's certainly the prominent data point. I would say we don't have data on new sidewalks other than the Quarterville Road project. And then there's also a new sidewalk that has already been bid related to Newton Street that will go down towards the Southborough Medical Building. So that's already funded, kind of behind us, so to say. Hasn't been done, but it's the repair piece. We could ask Karen to come with a comprehensive plan of what it would take to bring the current infrastructure for sidewalks up to par. We haven't done that yet because we had no funding mechanism available. Now,
okay, so it's really starting with we have to build this out as a project piece of it, understand, what we'd want to tackle. I do know there's that sort of list of sidewalks, but that's as far as it's gone at this point, I'm assuming.
Right, and there's been no planning related to new sidewalks. Like there's certainly a plan when the town became eligible for complete streets, which Karen can give you the application package when she comes. There was a whole listing of sidewalks in there. My personal view, there's listings of sidewalks on roads that I don't know how in the world you're ever going to put a sidewalk on certain roads because of the width of them. So there's a whole planning aspect to that of, can you, as much as it would be desirable, I think we'd all love sidewalks on every road. It's just, can you, and what are the other consequences of it because of what's around it?
So the $5 million number, that's sort of what's been identified for the DPW projects, but that would only include the Quarterville and that Newton Street piece because nothing
No,
else is expected.
the 5 million is Quarterville Road, new sidewalks, new infrastructure. That's 2.5 million of the 5. The other 2.5 million is fixing existing roads, i.e. where you put the 4 tires from your car, not where you would walk. So it would require a little bit of work to come up with a repair plan for the sidewalks. At least if there is one, we have not seen it.
Okay, so repair and new would all be new. Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mrs. Joyce, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Jason. So the 5 million, the only sidewalks in there are Cornerville.
Unless there's an existing on one of those roads that she's identified. And I don't,
Okay.
there's like 20 roads, to be completely honest.
So there's currently no sidewalk plan in Southborough.
No, I mean, I think I've heard at least there used to be a sidewalk committee.
Well, there was a committee, and there's a report that's on the DPW website of how their ranking of who should get sidewalks, what streets.
Yeah, so I haven't seen the cost related to that, but my understanding is that
There's
same
no-
plan was used when the town applied to the state to get complete streets grant funding. They had to submit that. So I think that would be a good thing, John, if we can get that application from Karen. I think that would be very insightful to both Mimi and Andrea's questions. Again, it doesn't have the numbers associated with it, but it gives you an idea of where you would go next if funding were available.
Yeah, and I know it's been said, but I'll say it again as chair of the master plan committee, that is the theme, is connectivity, sidewalks, bike lanes, trails. So that's a huge thing. I think that was it. Oh, is there a sidewalk fund? Because I know some developers that don't build sidewalks in their developments are supposed to pay instead. And is that going into a fund?
Good question. There's actually, to my understanding, 2 warrant articles on this year's town meeting. They're not exciting dollar amounts, in my personal opinion. They're tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands. But the town has received the money. It's currently sitting in the general fund. I think it needs to be reallocated for that specific purpose. So I think there are 2 articles this year to do just that. I believe it's less than 50,000 for 2 developments. One, I believe, is in the Oregon Road area, and one was from actually the town of Hopkinton, Legacy Farms. That one over by Weston Nurseries. There's some mitigation money. So DPW, you could come up with a brilliant sidewalk plan and use your $3 million and be done. Full disclosure. And I don't, I'm just saying that there's definitely that amount of work out there just on sidewalks and roads, as you can probably tell.
Thank you.
Any other questions on DPW? Because I'm going to pivot to Neary School.
Anyone? Nope.
All right. So as everyone's hopefully aware, and it ties into obviously what we just talked about on the senior center, the Neary School is 50 to 60 years old, depending upon wings, etc. It has not had any major capital put into it for approximately 25 years. It has at least $5 million of capital that is going to be needed just to keep it open as a school in the next few years. Talking roofs, windows. The issue with the 5 is the building is only assessed at 8. It will trigger a full code refresh, including ADA compliance, on most, if not all, of that building. So when one of the first meetings we had as capital, we identified that Neary needed some work. We approached the school committee because, as anyone that has been in town long enough knows, there's been this ongoing debate of, do we have too many schools in this town? Anyone that has followed the progress of that committee knows that both the school administration as well as your current elected school committee members have taken what I would term a brave step in listening, in studying this, more than I think anyone has ever studied this in this town. Where we go from here will be a town meeting vote, but what I can tell you is there will be a feasibility study that exists on the 2022 annual town meeting warrant. Whether we're doing that with or without MSBA funding will be something we know by the beginning of March. There's a public board meeting then that will determine whether the state wants to work with us or whether they're going to put us off a year. The intent as of now and the recommendation, now the school committee can always pull this back and they have every right to, is to advance the project regardless of funding. There will be a spirited debate on what the right steps are there. But just so you know, the schools are carrying $800,000 right now for the feasibility study related to Neary in their capital plan. The state has told us we should carry anywhere between $600,000 and $2 million. That's just for feasibility. That's to actually figure out what in the world we're going to do. And the documents to bring forward, I'll call it the much larger project, to town meeting. That will be probably a year-long process once it gets going, but we are on borrowed time with that facility to keep the students safe. So you will see considerable communication related to that, but that is certainly an item that could be bonded if the taxpayers vote in such a manner, but it's obviously part one of a much larger number. It would take that plan going through in the school committee's willingness to accept the recommendation of the subcommittee to make Woodward a viable option for many of the other things we've heard about in town that candidly are long overdue as well. So I would say, regardless of where you stand on whether we should tear down Neary and rebuild it, renovate it, or just put some Band-Aids on it and keep it functioning as a school, that building is going to need more than you have allocated to your committee from the feds. So that is certainly something that should, in my opinion, get some serious discussion of, can we ease the burden of an item that's been long on the capital plan and is certainly the subject of a more transformational change potentially for the town that goes well beyond those that have kids in the school system. So the other schools are in what I would call tremendous shape overall. Trotter, Woodward, and Finn. They will need roofs, but those are rounding compared to what we're talking about with Neary. Just in full disclosure, they're not insignificant numbers, but they're things you do every 20 to 30 years, much like you do to your homes, versus you're dealing with Neary, which is infrastructure that's 60 years old that hasn't been touched in about 25 years. So that's clearly where capital is going to be focused here in the next year or two, because it will likely be a project that is much larger than what we all experience with the public safety building, even if we are fortunate enough to get state funding to match a portion of what we expend. So it'd be remiss not to put that on your radar. How you want to deal with that item is certainly up for debate, but it's certainly going to be something that will be poured forward to town meeting, because it'll go well beyond any funding that you could possibly apply to it.
Mr. Palmer?
Jason, aren't there some smaller concerns that we could take into effect, maybe to augment things that are already on there? For instance, things that we looked at already, like they're going to be coming up to redo the paving over it at Finn, that we know is going to be open and viable. And aren't we we're looking at a redundant heating system at Algonquin that we'd have to pay a small amount for. Some smaller things, that capital items that we know are coming up, that we know that are likely to be funded, you know, through the school budgets and through town meeting, that we could throw in there and avoid the bigger questions here. But still allocate some money to where we're going to be spending it anyway.
That's a philosophical question. I'll give you my view just because you asked. First, the parking lots are funded via revolving funds. So that's a much larger conversation in this town of should we have revolving accounts or not, but that's not going to hit us as taxpayers. There's actually not even action required by town meeting for them to go pave the Finn parking lot. However, they were transparent and brought it forward. First time ever that a independent board has brought something forward that they could have funded on their own for transparency. So kudos to them for that. Now, on the Algonquin redundant water heater, I think one of the things I'd caution the committee to think about is, I know you're going to have a lot of people that are asking for things, but there's an administrative compliance aspect of everything you decide on the back end of this. It's called accounting. Obviously, Carla, and I think you met their consultant, was it Jennifer, right? She was at your last meeting. You know, every dollar we spend on Jennifer in consultants and accounting time is dollars that are administrative and have to be done to checks and balances of the funding requirements, but it's dollars that aren't going into infrastructure that we're going to benefit from in the future. And I would encourage you to think about it this way. Again, this is a personal view. The more you chop these capital items up, the harder it's going to be to hit all your compliance requirements. So I am one vote on the capital planning committee, but my encouragement to you would be, if you're going to look at capital and you believe capital should be items that you consider for use of this funding, I would pick some of our larger ticket items that are easier to administer, that you are sure the town would have to do anyways, and focus on those, as opposed to picking a $70,000 water heater as an example. That's a one-time item that is even more complicated because it's part of a regional allocation that I don't want to go through how the regional school budget works. It's just complicated. So I would stick to the easier compliance items because it puts candidly more money to allocate towards projects we all benefit from for hopefully 20, 30 or more years.
The bigger capital items as well, Jason, that's what will affect the tax base the best too, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we are in a great year for capital. All debt related to any prior school project just drops off the books after fiscal year 23, which is what we'll vote on in April or May, whenever town meeting gets scheduled. And the only thing we're really carrying that has a long tail is the public safety building now. And it's significantly less than what we are carrying this year. Just so you know, our debt drops from about 3 million this year related to capital projects down to closer to 1.5. There are some state reimbursements that offset it, but that's the magnitude of the drop. All the golf course items paid off after this year. The slew of recreation projects that were pushed through a couple of years ago, all paid off. So you're really just looking at one project on your long-term debt schedule before you get to these school related items.
Jason, we've been looking, I'm sorry, my dog's barking in the background. I'm assuming that with the new infrastructure bill federally, there's going to be a lot more money coming up for some of these infrastructure projects for the roads and stuff like that. So if we allocate this money for it now, would that go back into other funds if grant money came available? I think that's what Joe was saying last week.
So my education on this topic is that there are certain things that the state, through the bill that Governor Baker signed not too long ago, there's going to be grant programs that open up to allocate the state's portion of ARPA to communities. How they do that, I have no idea, right? I don't know if some are going to be competitive, some are just going to be here you go. A lot of it's based on public health. A lot of it's based on, you'll hear some stuff on frontline workers and hazard pay. But most of the other stuff is going to be related to IT, water, wastewater, and water infrastructure, and roads. So I would say if you did allocate to any of those three items, and we haven't gotten to IT yet, you certainly do have the ability to say, hey, select board, monitor what the state is doing on this and don't spend it like immediately. Wait for them to come out with their guidance in the next 3 to 6 months and make sure you're not going to get it from state ARPA before you do that. Now, federal, because I think that was your original question, John, I answered you on state, is clearly that's passed, but how they implement some of that is going to be very interesting. In how much gets allocated to Massachusetts will be, I think there was actually an article today. A lot of it's going to build those bridges on the Cape, rebuild them. That's the main item that Massachusetts got. We can all debate whether that's the right answer, but like I think it's worth monitoring. I think it's worth potentially our town administration working with, I know we don't really have a state rep for much longer, but we have a state senator and we also have a legislative delegation that they do have access to. Understanding if Southborough stands to benefit from the federal, that's just a question that's probably beyond any one of us on the screen, at least right now, that we're going to be able to answer.
What do we have remaining on the list at this point? I heard IT.
That's it. IT's left is what's
Okay.
left.
Right.
And it's really quick. That's why I saved it for last. Is there will certainly be projects coming forward from IT. Just in awareness, the IT director, Jay, was not in a position to vet them yet with capital. I'm sure they're well vetted ideas that he has worked through, hopefully with MTC and any other stakeholders. But we do anticipate you'll probably see some IT items specifically related to Wi-Fi. Again, we haven't vetted it. We haven't taken a position on it, but you will probably see some IT items that are coming up as at least placeholders on the capital plan.
No details on any of them yet, so we don't have any budget. This is very, very just high level.
Yeah, I mean, if you get something, we should probably coordinate because that was supposed to go forward this year and Jay pulled it because he wasn't ready to pitch it. And obviously we have to trust the department head. If they can't pitch it to a committee, it's pretty tough for any of us to pitch it to town meeting.
Any other questions for Mr. Malinowski?
So John, if there's no questions, can your committee deliberate either tonight or in a future meeting what you want from us? Because obviously I rattled off kind of what we see as the big items, but if you sense you're headed towards, hey, we'd like your top capital item, your top 4 capital item, or you want to wait to hear from the departments that you're probably gonna hear some of the same things over again. How do you want to go from here? Because obviously we have to debate as a capital planning committee. I imagine obviously we'll have some abstentions because of natural votes, but what can we do to help you realizing the dump of data I just threw on you?
Personally, like I asked earlier, if there's like a hot button of if you had X amount of percent, but I personally, I think we should really see what's come in. Believe it or not, no, we haven't gotten anything in yet. You had Melanie email all the boards and committees last week with an absolute deadline of the 15th or sooner, so we could have that because a lot of people, are saying, no, we're not meeting until then, or blah, 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 blah. So if I'd like to know your top ones and what would probably give the most bang for the taxpayers. What could potentially decrease the rate the most? What could take off the tax roll? So, which obviously sounds like roads and infrastructure, but I'm with roads and infrastructure, I'm wondering, I think there's going to be money coming in, that other sources of income that we could get for that besides just the ARPA. So I just really hope we stay on top of that on other sources of revenue for these projects. Anybody else, what their thoughts or what they'd like to see from?
Well, in terms of roads, I mean, we're looking at multiple year allotments. I mean, if you were looking at just filling what we would normally be paying for road maintenance into that fund, you're looking at $400K a year plus what you want to allot for sidewalks.
Yeah,
So, I mean, if you just did 2 years of normal road and sidewalk allotment, you'd probably be looking maybe at a 1.2 maybe, which would eat up over a third of our money right there. And that would be just funding it at the general fund expenditure for 2 years. Is that correct, Jason?
If you did 400 a year, yeah.
because
Plus an additional 2 for sidewalks.
it doesn't have to be just sidewalks and roads. I'm just curious to what your main priorities. You say that you don't take precedence of one project being more important than another, but that's really kind of not true, because you defer projects. There's got to be things that are more urgent. I'll put it that way, not more important, but more urgent things that be, as you're saying before, becoming dangerous to the public.
We
So
can do that for you. We've been fortunate that department heads have been very realistic over the last few years and have listened when we said we only have so much to work with, and they've tried to listen to their fellow department heads, and they have made what I thought was going to be a very tough decision as a voting member very easy, because they removed some of the hot button items. Now, doesn't mean that they won't come back, but we can certainly meet and deliberate. We're meeting Monday night to give you a list of items that we view as the top priorities in the next, I'll call it 3 years, unless you'd like me to go further out.
I'd be happy with 3, because that's how far that this ARPA money is good for. Again, I'm looking for the opinion of anybody else in the committee, what you'd like Jason to and his committee to come back with for information that you would find helpful. Anybody else have anything besides what I asked for?
John, I'd just like to add one point to what you were talking about, because when you're dealing with tax impact, we can spend just on what comes out of the general fund that we recommend for roads and things, and it'll have a tax difference on the entire town. So I'm not dissuading you from the question you're asking. I'm just saying that, I think we can separate the urgency from the tax impact. That's all.
The one thing I'd ask you to consider there, Joe, is, and this is how you all decide to define your policy, is if you allocate money to road maintenance, that certainly takes the burden off the taxpayers in the short term. But I don't think there's anyone sitting here that says we're going to remove it in the future. So it creates a potential for a perceived flat tax rate or slight increase. And then you know what's going to happen? I'm just trying to, because I've seen the numbers. You not only will be adding that back in once ARPA runs out, but you have this massive project I just talked about, that something's going to happen to keep our kids in school that will hit the tax bills. So now people got used to a lower number that maybe was too good to be true, as much as we want that to happen. Look, I'm the first person that wants a lower tax bill. You have to think about stabilization with some of your decisions as well, because you don't want to create a situation where you create a momentary blip to make people happy and then have a whipsaw on the back end that is just unattainable for some people.
I appreciate exactly that point, and I think that in a prior meeting, what I addressed was that if we allot this in annual meetings, correct, and then we use ARPA money to cover it. What it does is it'll cause actually a surplus wave in accounting at the end of the year, and that money could then be reapportioned. So we can't fund things like stabilization and pensions and all these other things. But if we use the money in a way that creates a surplus at the end of the year, that money could then be allotted to purposes like that in the future to address sort of the situation of what you're talking about, that what we were really doing was actually creating, say, a stabilization fund over 2 or 3 years by funding these things, but also maintaining them in the budget and making the tax roll cover it. So therefore, we're using accounting to create a stabilization fund by charging taxpayers what they normally would pay for, but using ARPA money to pay for it. And then at the end of the year, we reallocate the tax funds that we charged to create something like a stabilization fund. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that that's possible.
So John, maybe going back to kind of where you had mentioned about sort of what are we looking for from the capital committee? I almost would like maybe for this committee, because I know we sort of had a light group the first meeting, then our second meeting, we spent most of it talking with the consultants. This one, we've kind of jumped right in. It's been great hearing all the different opportunities, but I think we could maybe really use as a committee some time just to sort of walk through, make sure we understand what our goals are, right? And kind of come up with our own framework for how we want to assess things and then kind of go out, because I would hate to start making groups kind of jump through hoops and do work without kind of understanding on our end what we're trying to achieve with this money, right? And kind of what inputs we need to be able to make an effective decision. So I'm almost thinking that maybe we need our meeting next week to kind of start with just this sort of core group to kind of start thinking through some of those pieces, because I'm not 100% sure that I have it clear in my head kind of where we're going in terms of our goals, what we want to make sure we present out to the select board at the end. I don't know how others feel, but again, I just want to be cautious about asking groups to start doing work for us before we really
even know what we
understand what the
want.
inputs are, that we're looking for.
I agree. Mr. Schoner, so your hand up?
Yeah, I'll agree with Andrea here, if you guys can hear me. And it seems like what we're doing right now is we're just gathering information, right? I mean, so if there's a set of capital projects that could be funded, well, then fine. So we should have a list of capital projects that can be funded. Just like, we heard from facilities that there's a list of things that could be funded. It seems like what we're doing right, or maybe we're doing 2 or 3 things here in parallel, but we should be gathering the list of things that could be funded from the various departments and the community, right? I guess and I apologize, I missed the last meeting, but I don't know how we're getting input from the community. Seems like we should talk about that. But right now we're just gathering a list. I don't know that we need to debate the specific tax trade-offs right now. It seems like we're gathering a list of projects that could be funded. And then we also need to talk about, so how are we going to, as a committee, set priorities? And I think maybe that's what you're saying, Andrea, because it's not clear to me what our priorities are. So I guess to support what you said, John, I would ask the capital committee to give us a list of their top 5 or 10 projects that they would like to have funded. So we just have a list and what the dollar numbers are that are associated with those. And then we put it on our list. And we get the same thing from some other committees, so, what is it you want to spend money on? We'll have a list of 20 or 30 or 50 items. And then whatever our policy is that we've kind of agreed on amongst ourselves on how we want to triage that list, then we can apply the policy. So I guess that's how I think about it. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's how I think about it.
Anyone else?
Yeah, just a quick comment, which may or may not be helpful. I just want to remind everyone that it's the select board that's going to make this choice, and we're just an advisory board. So I think that giving them the framework to make the decision is more important for us than to actually make decisions. Just something to think about.
Anyone else? Are there any questions for Mr. Malinowski? Okay. Jason, thank you so much for coming tonight. I appreciate it. And
Thanks.
my head is spinning. I appreciate that a lot. That's a lot of information.
Just
And,
let us know what you need. We'll be ready.
it blows my mind how much you know about so much sometimes, kid. So
Thank you,
thank you.
Jason.
And I'll let you know.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks.
It's not an easy job. Thank you for volunteering.
Have a good night. All right. Bouncing back to the original part of the agenda of organization of the committee. So we need a chair, a vice chair, and a scribe, a secretary, unless we choose to keep taking turns like we've been doing. So has anybody thought about, whether they have any interest in or bandwidth or time to be the chair or vice chair or scribe?
So if, sorry, Joe, your hand went up.
I had a question just because having served in the communities I've served on, I think, what I've realized is really great from a chair is somebody that knows procedure and knows how to run the meetings. And so, I'm looking at the people on the board, and I know, John, you don't want the job, but
I just can't. I'll just be honest. I just really.
For everybody, I went for one last try there. Okay.
This week, let me know, like with all the emailing and things I did and trying to work, it was difficult. And I accidentally put the wrong date on the agenda and had to have it revised. So right there showed me, yeah, I wouldn't be very.
Have some other people on the committee chaired committees because I haven't chaired a committee. I've served on a bunch. And I realize how wonderful it is to have somebody that's either chaired committees before, so they have a little experience in just maintaining and running them.
Let me just add to that. So when I was on advisory, 15 years ago or so, I'd been on for like 6 months. Next thing you know, I'm chair. I had no experience chairing a meeting. I barely knew what how to run a meeting or any of the procedures. As long as you have a solid vice chair, or even people to just say, hey, procedurally, you might want to do this or that. It's really not that difficult for even a new member to run a meeting procedurally. You guys this is probably the easiest meeting I've run in a long time. You guys are great. Everybody raises their hand. No one jumps or speaks all over everybody. It's been very fortunate. I'm just trying to, because I'm looking at the committees, the people on this committee right now, and there's 2 people that are sticking out that meet that criterion. I know I can't do it. And Ms. Luttrell, you're the next one in that. I don't know whether you have a whole lot of time to chair or anything like that either. So I don't think it has to be somebody that's chaired other meetings. That's all I'm saying.
So I've never chaired a meeting. This is my first committee I'm on. But I know there's a lot of folks who don't want the chair position. I'd be happy to do it. I would need some help making sure I understand the procedural aspects of it. But I know how to run a meeting. Project manager for years. It's kind of what I did. So if there aren't folks who want to step into that, who have that experience, it's something I'm happy to pick up and learn and pick it up for this group.
Great. I'd be your vice.
I would take you as my vice.
All right, well, I'm going to make okay. Well, that just made my life so easy. I'm going to make a motion to appoint Ms. Andrea Hamilton as the chair of the ARPA committee.
Second.
Actually, I can't make a motion as chair, can I?
Yes,
I move that Ms. Hamilton be appointed chair of the ARPA Committee.
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Ms. Luttrell. Any discussion? I'm going to do a roll call vote as I see him on the screen. Mr. Palmer?
Aye.
Ms. Rubenstein?
Aye.
Ms. Luttrell?
Aye.
Mr. Schoner?
Aye.
Mr. Martell?
Aye.
Myself, aye, and Ms. Hamilton. Okay,
Hi, if I can get off mute.
nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for doing that.
I will see if I live to regret it, but we'll give it a try.
Oh, you will. Not too late. No, it's way too late to change your mind, but no, you'll be good.
Yeah, it's too late. Sorry.
That's it. All right. All right.
Do I have a
got it.
motion to make Ms. Luttrell the
Sure.
vice chair?
I move that we appoint Ms. Luttrell vice chair of the ARPA Committee.
Do I
I
have a
second.
A second, Ms. Rubenstein. Okay, any discussion? This is your last chance to pull out, Mimi. All right, gonna go roll call as I see it again. Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Ms. Rubenstein,
Aye.
Ms. Latrell,
Aye.
Mr. Shoner,
Aye.
Mr. Martell,
Aye.
Ms. Hamilton,
Aye.
and myself, aye. It passes unanimously. Wonderful. Anybody want to step up and take the minutes every week, or do we want to keep doing it the way we've been doing it, take turns? I have no problem either way.
I
I think it would be good to
participate.
rotate.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so will anybody, can somebody do the minutes for tonight?
I'll take them.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Palmer. You just did them the other day, so thank you. Appreciate that. Unfortunately, by the time I got yours, I tried to get that on the agenda to approve the minutes that you had sent, but they're not in the office until Friday, so they weren't able to get that on there. So I don't know procedurally. if
No, we have to
can-
wait till we need to wait till the next meeting.
Until they're on the
Fine.
agenda. I thought so.
Yeah, no
But,
worries.
oh, hey, I'm not chair. So.
Just
I
as
don't
an
think I'm on the
FYI.
committee's email because I didn't get any minutes.
You didn't? Did everybody else get them?
I think,
Well,
I
that's-
think, Amy, I think you're not on the ARPA, the email list.
I thought I
Oh,
could have sworn
another
she
reason.
was. Mimi, you know, I can send it to you right now because I have my other machine running.
Yeah, I think it was still,
No, I can't because that just died.
Yes.
I'll send her the minutes. That's not an issue.
Okay. What do we have here? Next on, do you have the agenda in front of you?
I think I do. Hold on.
Because
let
if
me-
not, I can tell you what's on it because I am going to step back and
Yeah.
let you take over.
All right, so we've done our organization of the committee. We've done our discussions and presentations from facilities and capital. And DPW Board of Health wanted to meet first, so that'll get deferred, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, Board of Health, they wanted to have their meeting and I think they're having theirs Monday. DPW, I never heard back or got a reply from my email from Ms. Galligan.
Right.
And as of yet, I do not believe we've gotten any responses to our requests for items to all the boards, committees and department heads, except for, the ones we've
Okay.
had so far.
So John, if you've got any emails that are kind of outstanding on those, if you want to pop me on them, then I can keep track of them.
They were all going through Melanie and I'll have her at once. So we have to, Joe, when you do the minutes, if you could just send off that we voted unanimously for Ms. Hamilton to be chair, Ms. Latrell vice chair, so we can send that off to the town clerk. And then I'll tell Melanie to make sure everything gets forwarded through you. But there really hasn't been any emails
There's
except
no
for
chatter yet. Okay.
the
perfect.
only thing I did everything through Melanie, which is the town administrator's assistant. And just because that way we had it going through there and administrator, she could send it all out because we didn't have an official chair.
Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr.
Joe, I
Palmer.
see your
Nope.
hand. Oh, Mr. Palmer, I'm sorry, I see your
Sorry.
hand.
John, you repeat that. You want me to, when I do the minutes, you want me to send them in, or you wanted me to take a notation and send that to them? That the chair had been changed.
We just need to have an email to the clerk that the chair has changed, that was and what the vote was by, who voted. And that's it.
Okay, you
If
want
you
me to
could.
email the clerk and just let them know? Okay, no problem.
Yeah, that the ARPA committee has been organized and this is our chair and our vice chair, and our scribe will be rotated.
Okay,
Please, if you don't mind.
no, I'll send it to the clerk. No problem.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So moving through, that brings us to next steps. So the first was our outreach and discussing the surveys and the strategies, and that a vote may be taken. And then the strategy of evolution of requests. So I think this gets into a bit of what we were just talking about, kind of thinking about, how we're getting our remaining feedback, and maybe thinking a little bit more broadly about how we want to be evaluating different requests. Perhaps this would be better served if we moved it next week and made it a sort of larger discussion. I'm seeing that it's already 9:15. How do folks feel about that? If we use the next week meeting to have a more sort of inclusive discussion about our goals and our overall strategy here.
Sounds good to me.
That works for me.
Yes.
Okay.
And hopefully we might even have some responses by then. I know that in the past, we said we wanted to have youth and family services
Yep.
and schools, and Board of Health definitely wants to come in and talk about what their needs. So I don't know if you want to reach out to them and follow up to see if it's still like that.
Yeah, and so that, okay, and that's separate than what has been requested by Melanie right now, which is just sort of looking for lists. Is that correct?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Board of Health was supposed to come tonight, and they have, and give it, everybody was supposed to be a brief 5 to 10 minute presentation. I knew Capital, because that covers pretty much everybody's request, so most of them would be one of the longest. I think the second longest will be probably Board of Health, because this is a COVID relief program, so they may
Technically,
have
it's
some
not,
that
John.
it,
We can talk
caveat,
about it
yeah.
next time, but technically it's not a COVID relief.
But I apologize. I misspoke, but I know that they have some things to talk about.
But I think that also goes to what is our overall strategy for evaluating bids? You know, are we prioritizing certain requests over others, right? I mean, so I think Board of Health was one that I had actually requested because I wanted to see if there was sort of ongoing acute need, right? But I think as a committee, we need to have a discussion about how we want to assess those different requests as they come in. Do we have things that we prioritize over others? So I saw Ms. Latrell, give your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to say that the planning board is meeting on Monday, which is why you haven't received any feedback from the planning, although the chair did send me a sidewalk request.
It's a lot of sidewalks.
A lot of sidewalks.
Mr. Palmer?
Yeah, you probably expect something from Trails, because I talked to the head of the Trails Committee too. I was also interested in maybe adding, and I'm not sure who the right person would be. We're going to be talking to the school board, but also maybe somebody in human resources for the town to understand who the frontline people were that were working on the front lines. I know it's within our purview, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't investigate who was working on the front lines during that time. You know, who was most stressed by the situations. I mean, right down to teachers that had to, you know, boggle their minds as to how they're going to teach classes on Zoom and keep them engaged. You know, I don't know what the committee wants to do in terms of resources to acknowledge that, or if we do, but I think we should at least explore it.
Yep, I agree with that. And again, I think I come back to, do we feel, I think we can continue to do reach outs as a committee. Would it make sense to take sort of a full hour next week to kind of outline the different reach outs we want to do, even if we don't know the exact committee, but what sort of feedback are we looking to get? Because I mean, I hear that on the HR piece, right? I mean, we haven't touched anywhere in here on, you know, small business relief, things like that, right? This is such a broad mandate that I think, you know, it would maybe make sense for us to just take an hour to kind of gather ourselves and make sure we have a really strategic approach to how we're going out and requesting folks to submit information to us. Again, I know we're trying to move really, really fast here, but would folks be okay if that was just the agenda next week, is really kind of getting our bearings and figuring out what is our overall plan, who do we want to reach out to, and making really a comprehensive plan for how we're going to do that?
Sounds like a good strategy.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean,
Mr.
we
Wood?
still need to, my question was pretty much what you were saying. We don't even know what we want to accomplish. Do we want to try to lower the tax base? Do we want to try to, do we want to set up any programs with tax relief for seniors, or any of that type of stuff, for anybody who's been struggling with the economy, that lost a job? Do we want to have small business relief? We got to figure out what we want to do with this, or what we can, you know, we know, we've been hearing what people want, but there's so much that we can do with it still, that we just need to figure out what we want to do with it and how much of it we want to do towards, like, you know, do we want to put 25% towards, or 5% towards, these relief funds of different things and just stuff like that. So I think we should definitely have it on the agenda for a bigger, longer discussion of pretty much just that.
Mr. Martell?
Hey, thank you. I do think we should talk about this. I think the charge, when I read it, was pretty clear to me, and specific relief was not part of it. So it's something I do think that, and I might be wrong from what I read.
So you certainly can do direct economic relief through it. You can, it's not the charge, it's not a mandate for it, but it's certainly within the bounds of what you can do.
So the three areas I saw, one was direct response to the ongoing pandemic. So for example, if the Board of Health needed to run a vaccine clinic and they had expenses, we could fund that because it's directly in response to the ongoing pandemic. The second one was, did the town take a revenue hit, which it did, as a result of COVID? And if as a result of that, were services impacted, and how can we use this money to restore those services? The third bucket was, how can we as a town invest in our infrastructure to promote an economic recovery from COVID? Those are the three buckets that the Department of Revenue have specified for us to look at. It doesn't say anything about giving tax relief to certain portions of the town. This isn't really about individual relief like you'd see at the Board of Commissioners of Trust Funds. This is about the town's recovery. And I think it's important that, and maybe there are others who read it differently, and I'm okay with that. I'm happy to have the conversation. But I think we need to be very clear on what we're actually allowed to do and what we should be advising the select board to do.
I believe it has been clarified, and maybe I'm wrong, but I can go back and check that. If we wanted to, we could use it, take this money and write a check to every member in the town. That we could just do direct monetary reimbursement with this money.
I think we should check on that.
Okay, I will look up, but that is my general understanding. Okay, Mr. Palmer?
Yeah, my understanding of that is actually the same as yours. That we could reimburse every family in Southborough $100 because we all know we bought masks. We would be able to do things like that. I understand and I appreciate everybody wants to do the strategy solutions in the next meeting, but I would also say that, given our time frame, we're gonna have to walk and chew gum at the same time. And I think that we shouldn't shy away from scheduling more people to come in the next meeting, because we can always go back and ask questions later, but the faster we process the needs of each and every department head, the faster we have them on the list, and we can determine a lot of the things as we go. I don't think that we're hurting anybody by asking for more information. Yes, we will be asking some people to do a few things that they might not normally do, but given our time constraints, I don't think we have time to work too methodically. I think we have time to work methodically, but we need to just keep bringing people in and keep getting more information as we go. That would be my advice to the committee.
Ms. Latrell?
A couple of things. In answer to Tim's comment, I have the final rule in front of me. Responding to public health and economic impacts of COVID-19, and the eligible categories are public health, assistance to households, assistance to small business, assistance to nonprofit, aid to impacted industries and public sector capacity. So I think those, we could send $100 to everyone in town. And I think it's important for us to get organized and know where we're going and how we're going to get there. And I think we'll be able to take input much more efficiently, and if we're more organized and know how to prioritize and know how we're going to move forward.
perhaps sort of in service to sort of the two things we're working against, right? Sort of how do we come with a really transparent, concrete strategy for how we're evaluating and the timeline that we're on. I can start putting together maybe like a scaffold of a slide deck or something that we can be working towards. Hey, kid, on a call. This is what you're gonna get if I'm the chair. So that we have something we're looking to populate. So it's not sort of just a free-willing conversation, but that's we're actually moving towards a goal of kind of having a really clearly defined sort of set of slides that we're referencing back as we move through. Would that make sense if I start putting something together like that? So that again, it's not sort of just an open-ended free-willing discussion that we have for the next couple of weeks, but really that we're coming at it next week with a goal to kind of outline our overall approach here.
Those were the days.
Right?
So, 9:30 is exciting in my house.
In your defense, you did warn us about the time of the night.
Anyway, so are there any more comments then about next sort of our next week? Again, I hear if we're getting continued feedback, I'm happy to schedule folks. If I hear back that the Board of Health can come next week or something like that, for example, happy to put them on the agenda. But sort of put item number one as sort of to put together this overall strategy for how we're kind of approaching this, who we want to reach out to. Let's make sure we have a really concrete set of the different groups that we want to reach out to, who's reaching out to them, and then we can start making sure we have, week by week folks on the agenda. Ms. Rubenstein?
I agree that we should have the framework so that we know what we're looking for. But additionally, I wanted to thank you for sending out the surveys, because I've gone through all those surveys and they highlight so far the same items that were brought up tonight. And I found that very useful as a framework for listening to people.
Yeah, and Anna, you also reached out to the MTC committee, and they have and so at the point where we're ready to do a survey, we've already got a line in with someone who can help us put that together, right? And so we've got some good resources available to us there. So again, I think we have the ability to move fast once we're ready to go. I just want to make sure we don't move so fast that we sort of default our way into things or don't talk to some of the folks we really need to be talking to.
I did have a question about the timing of a survey. I mean, if you want to get a survey out, you need at least 2 weeks, and then you have to compile the data. And I thought there was a deadline in March. We had to put items in for consideration for town meeting. I can't remember what it was for the warrant.
It's if there's an impact to any of the warrants, correct? Then we would need.
If you want to get anything into the warrant, meaning that if you don't get it in by then, you can't get it in the warrant, it won't hit town meeting and can't be voted on for this year. Or at least, wait a minute, let me correct that. It won't be voted in for this year unless there's an additional town meeting this year, in which case you would have a second bite at the apple.
Okay, and what would be examples of, so most of the stuff, right, this is the select board directly allocates this money, right? So this isn't something that necessarily needs a vote on town meeting. So would it be if we were, for example, picking up something in the capital plan that we were voting for, but now we would no longer need that money allocated because we're funding it through here? What would be?
I'm not going to claim to be an expert in this in any regard, but say, for instance, you were going to fund the $400,000 for road maintenance, and you didn't get it into the town warrant that it was coming from ARPA. You would essentially be allowing that to go through, in which case they'd have to allocate it to the tax base. So they would have to count on that in taxes, as opposed to maybe if we said we were paying for it ahead of time in the warrant, then it might not be assigned to the tax base.
Okay.
It's more a matter, I think it's more a matter of logistics into how we did it, as opposed to say, when I said, hey, if we just wait for it to pass and it goes to the tax rate and then we decide to fund it after the fact, then you're creating maybe a wave of funding that goes to the end of the year that then the town would be allowed to, reallocate and vote on where it goes. I think issues like that, but that's really not our purview. That's more policy of the select board, honestly.
Yeah. And let's be realistic. I mean, that's 3 weeks from now, right? Are we going to have something in? I don't think that's I think that date is meaningless to us. I don't think there's any chance we hit anything for it, and we should just sort of set that aside and work towards it's the May date, right? Would be the
May
town date.
16th,
Yeah, yep,
by May 16th.
by May 16th. Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Just as a matter of awareness.
Yeah, no, I know. I've had that March date in my head too, but I'm now looking at February 3rd. It's a short month too. We don't even have a leap year. So we are at 9:30. So if I look at what we have remaining on the agenda, so we have the vote on the minutes from our previous meeting, or from the January 19th meeting. Is that just a roll call vote? Is that how we do that?
What you do is somebody will make a motion to accept the minutes as written, and then usually you'll have a second, then you have discussion on any changes or amendments will get put in, and then, you know, your vote will be to be as amended if there's changes, unless
Okay.
people say that there's nothing that they thought it needed to be changed.
Okay. So do we have a movement?
Sure, I guess I'll make the motion. I make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
I second.
Is this the January 19th, or is this the previous?
Just the January 19th, because I wasn't able to amend the agenda to include the second set of minutes in time, because when I called the other day, they didn't get back to me, and then when I called back, they were gone, and she was out till Friday, so I couldn't get it amended for the meeting tonight.
Procedurally, I have a question on the minutes.
Okay,
There was a date, there was the wrong meeting date. Did that correction get made?
that was on the agenda.
No, on the minutes. It said
Where's-
the next meeting was February 1st, I think, and it was February 3rd.
Oh, I think those were my minutes.
That's his minutes. That's
Those were
my
my
minutes
minutes.
of the
I-
19th.
And I made
Okay.
that change for you already.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, this is for the minutes of Wednesday, January 19th.
So I have the second. Do we do the roll call vote now?
Yep.
Okay. All right, Mr. Martell,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Ms. Rubenstein.
I have to abstain, I wasn't there.
Okay. Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Schoner, am I saying that right?
Yes, aye.
Mr. People are moving around. Ms. Latrell.
Oh, abstain. I wasn't here, not part of the committee.
Okay, and I will abstain because I was also not there. Okay, so
Well, does that pass? If we have 3 abstentions? Yes, still go for.
what's the requirement for passing?
Abstentions don't count.
Yeah.
So as long as you have a majority, it
Majority.
passes.
Okay, okay. So that passes. So then let's move on to unfinished business. Is there anything that anyone wants to raise up for unfinished business? Okay, new business. So I'd open up for public comment, if there's any public comment from anyone on the line. A couple of attendees.
Don't see any.
Nope, I don't see any hands, so. Then our next meeting. And so I will put together the agenda. So I would say that it'll be primarily a discussion on committee strategy. And then if we hear back from any of the committees that have been reached out to, if they'd like to come and talk to us, I will add them as well. And then we'd leave, if there's minutes to vote on, we'll vote on minutes. And then unfinished business, and then new business is the public comment and the next meeting discussion. So similar to what we did today. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
So just so you know, you may know, you may not. So you need to
I don't.
post the agenda 48 hours before the meeting.
Okay. So we
48
should probably
business
figure
hours
out
so we
when
can
we're
start that.
meeting.
What's that?
We should probably figure out when we're meeting then.
Yep. And then once you send the agenda in, reach out to Jason and reserve a Zoom room
Okay,
for the same time.
okay.
So you don't panic thinking you did it wrong like I did last week, thinking I reserved the room for the 10th instead of the 3rd. And anyway,
What's Jason's last?
You can reserve those right through your email,
Okay,
through the scheduler. I do that.
okay.
what? I don't know how to do that.
You just have to log in to Outlook using your Southborough MA address.
Yeah. And then
I
go
can-
into schedule and you just click on the date and a little window comes up. You do more information, then you can invite everyone in the committee.
Since I am no longer chair and or vice chair. I
It's
may not
always,
need to do
it's
that.
always good to learn, John.
It is, it is.
So do we want to do this time next week? Does that work for folks? So it would be Thursday at 7:30. Be the 10th.
I'm available.
Okay. So we will set it up then for Thursday, the 10th, and I'll have the agenda out by Tuesday.
And do you want me to reserve the room for you, Andrew?
Sure, if you'd like to.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. And so with that, we've made it through our agenda. So I believe we adjourn. Is there something special I need to say for us to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion for us to adjourn at 9:36 today.
I second.
All right, and then we do a roll call.
Yes.
Okay. So Mr. Martell,
Aye.
Mr. Wood,
Aye.
Ms. Rubenstein,
Hi.
Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Shoner,
Aye.
Ms. Latrell.
Aye.
I will vote aye. We are adjourned. All right.
Ms.
thank you.
Latrell and Ms. Hamilton, thank you both so much for stepping up. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Andrea.
It's going to be
Thank you.
exciting.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right. We'll talk next week. Bye,
Have a
everyone.
great
Have
night,
a good
everybody.
night.
Bye.